Pain is a signal, it's a messenger, but we often misinterpret it. From a young age we're conditioned to avoid pain. Touch a hot stove, pull your hand back, fall on the pavement, learn to walk more carefully. Get rejected, stop putting yourself out there. The message becomes ingrained. Pain is bad, and it must mean something is wrong, but that's not always true. In fact, some of the most meaningful forms of progress come with a degree of pain. Not all pain is destructive. Some pain is instructive. When we hit resistance, when the road gets difficult, when everything in us wants to quit, what we're often experiencing is the friction of transformation. Like muscles that tear to grow stronger, our emotional and psychological boundaries stretch when we're under pressure. The discomfort isn't a stop sign, it's a sign that we're on the edge of something important. Think about any time you've grown, truly grown, not just changed direction, but evolved. Maybe it was after a heartbreak. Maybe it was when you took on a challenge that scared you. Maybe it was in the middle of failure. There was pain, but when you look back, you see it differently. You realize that pain was the turning point, the moment something cracked open, the moment you discovered who you really were. The problem is, in the moment, pain feels like chaos. It disrupts our narrative, it breaks our rhythm, it makes us question everything, and the mind does something very natural when that happens. It looks for escape. It starts offering you exit routes. You've done enough, this isn't working, maybe this just isn't for you. Those thoughts aren't truth, they're defense mechanisms. Your brain wants safety, but your potential, that lives outside of safety. We often forget that growth is inherently uncomfortable. That's what makes it growth. If it was comfortable, it would mean you've already been there. It would mean you're not stretching into something new. The discomfort you feel is evidence that you're pushing beyond your current limits. That's not failure, that's development. There's a moment in every journey where momentum fades. You start out full of energy, full of vision. The goal is clear, and the path seems possible, but then obstacles show up. Not just external ones, the internal ones too. Doubt, fatigue, fear. That's when pain sets in, and that's also when most people quit. Not because they lack talent, not because the goal isn't meaningful, but because they mistake pain for failure. Here's what they miss. Pain is a sign you're on the right track. It's your body, your mind, your spirit being stretched to accommodate something bigger, something better, something unfamiliar. When athletes train, they learn to embrace pain, not because they enjoy it, but because they understand what it means. They know that the soreness after a hard workout isn't a signal to stop, it's proof that they pushed hard enough for growth to begin. The pain is part of the process. It's how capacity is built. The same applies to emotional pain, creative pain, entrepreneurial pain, relational pain. When you feel friction in your pursuit, when you're putting in effort and not seeing immediate returns, that's the muscle building phase of any worthwhile endeavor. You're developing resilience, you're training endurance. You're learning how to show up even when it's hard. But we don't talk enough about this phase. We glorify the breakthroughs, the wins, the inspirational moments. We overlook the middle, the messy, painful, ambiguous stretch where nothing feels like it's working. That's the part no one sees. That's also the part that defines us. What you do when pain shows up will determine what kind of leader, creator, or person you become. Anyone can be positive when things are going well. Anyone can be hopeful at the start. The ones who make it, who truly grow, are the ones who stay in the game when it hurts. They don't run from pain, they learn from it, they listen to it, they let it shape them. And here's something else to consider. Pain makes things meaningful. If something costs you nothing, it means less to you. It's human nature. The more we invest time, energy, emotion, the more we care. Pain is often the price of significance. The projects, the people, the missions that matter the most to us usually come with the most struggle, not because we're doing something wrong, but because we're doing something real. The mistake we often make is assuming that difficulty means we're on the wrong path, but the truth is, difficulty is usually a sign that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You're in the crucible. The heat is up, the raw material is being refined. When we quit because it hurts, we rob ourselves of the transformation that could have happened if we had just stayed with the discomfort a little longer. If we had just trusted that the pain was part of the process. that what felt like breaking down was actually breaking through. There is a moment, right before something changes, where it feels the hardest. Like the bodybuilder on their final rep, like the student the night before the exam, like the entrepreneur after the fifth rejection, it's the point of maximum resistance, but if you push through it, not recklessly, but with awareness, you often discover that pain was not your enemy. It was your threshold. This isn't just about being tough. This is about being aware, recognizing that pain has a purpose, that it's trying to show you something, not necessarily to endure blindly, but to look closer. What's the pain teaching you? What part of yourself is being stretched? Where are you growing stronger, even if you don't feel it yet? We've been taught to fear pain. But if you reframe it, if you see it as a signpost, a teacher, a signal that something is shifting, then pain becomes part of the compass. It stops being something to run from and starts being something to work through. You might be feeling the pull to quit right now. You might be at the edge of your capacity. You might be asking yourself if it's worth it. Those questions are normal, but the presence of pain doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. It means you're pushing into something worthwhile. There's no shame in struggle. There's no weakness in being tired. The only failure is in forgetting what the pain means. Motivation is exciting. It's powerful, magnetic, even addictive. It's that surge of energy you feel after hearing the right words, seeing the right image, or envisioning the goal just vividly enough that it feels within reach. Motivation gets you started. It gets you out of bed, onto the path, into motion. But what happens when that rush disappears? What happens on the days when you don't feel inspired, when the fire has dimmed, when the same vision that once thrilled you now feels distant or dull? This is where most people stall, not because they don't care, not because they're not capable, but because they confused motivation with fuel. Motivation is a spark. It's not the engine. It's not what carries you over the long miles, through the storms, or across the hard seasons. The real fuel, the only thing powerful enough to keep you moving when everything else tells you to stop, is purpose. Purpose doesn't always shout. It doesn't come wrapped in adrenaline or euphoria. It's quieter. It's steadier. It's the deep sense of knowing that what you're doing matters, even when it's not glamorous, even when it's not easy, even when no one's watching. Purpose is what gets you back up after failure. It's what makes the effort worthwhile, even when there are no guarantees of success. Motivation gives you the how for a little while. Purpose gives you the why forever. People often ask how to stay consistent. They want to know how to stay disciplined, how to keep showing up when the mood is gone. They think it's about routines or habits or hacks, and those things can help, but none of them are sustainable if they're not connected to something deeper. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, you will eventually stop doing it. Discipline without purpose becomes burnout. Movement without meaning becomes exhaustion. Purpose gives weight to your actions. It gives direction to your work. It makes effort meaningful. Think of the most committed people you know, the ones who keep showing up year after year through the highs and the lows. Ask them what keeps them going. It's not motivation. It's not excitement. It's not the promise of reward. It's purpose. They believe in what they're doing. They believe in why they're doing it, and that belief sustains them. When purpose becomes clear, the challenges become part of the story, not the end of it. You stop seeing obstacles as signs to quit and start seeing them as confirmation that you're in pursuit of something real. Purpose transforms resistance into relevance. It changes the way you process pain, failure, and uncertainty. You're no longer just enduring, you're building something. People with purpose are hard to knock off course, not because they're immune to struggle, but because they've anchored their effort to something bigger than convenience. They've made a decision to move forward even when it doesn't feel good, because the goal isn't just comfort, it's contribution, it's impact, it's meaning. Purpose isn't about grandeur. It's not always about saving the world or building something massive. Sometimes it's about doing one thing well, consistently, because it aligns with your values. It's about knowing who you are and what matters to you, and letting that clarity drive your behavior. When you know your why, you don't need constant reminders. You don't need external validation. You don't need every step to be fun or exciting. You just keep going, because purpose doesn't fade the way motivation does. There will be mornings when the alarm feels like a weight. There will be weeks when progress is invisible. There will be projects that feel like they're going nowhere. In those moments, motivation won't be enough. You won't be able to hype yourself into action. You won't care about inspiration quotes or productivity tips. The only thing that will move you is the knowledge that what you're doing still matters, even if it's hard, even if it's thankless, even if it's unseen. Purpose doesn't prevent difficulty, but it does give you the strength to face it, because when your why is strong enough, the how will find its way. It may not be pretty, it may not be perfect, but you'll still be in the fight. You'll still be in motion, and that's where real progress happens. In the unglamorous grind, in the middle of discomfort, in the steady steps forward when no one's clapping and nothing's easy. The myth of motivation is that it will always be there when you need it. But the truth is, motivation is fleeting, it comes and goes, it's influenced by mood, environment, sleep, diet, distractions, any number of variables you can't always control. Purpose, on the other hand, is rooted in choice. It's a decision you make to keep showing up because what you're doing has meaning to you. It's not about feeling, it's about alignment. When your actions are aligned with your values, they become more sustainable. You don't have to trick yourself into working. You don't have to chase the next high. You just return to your reason. You return to the foundation. Purpose becomes the compass, and even when the path is hard, you're still pointed in the right direction. There's something powerful that happens when you tie your effort to a cause greater than comfort. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" and start asking, "Does this matter?" That question reframes everything. It moves you from impulse to intention. It turns temporary feelings into long-term focus. It gives you a reason to stay in the game when the scoreboard isn't in your favor. Purpose allows you to be patient. It helps you see beyond the urgency of right now, because when you're grounded in something meaningful, you can afford to move slower, more deliberately, with more care. You're not trying to chase every trend or sprint to every milestone. You're building something that lasts, and things that last are rarely built in haste. There will always be reasons to quit. Excuses are abundant. Distractions are endless. The world is noisy, and the resistance is real. But when you're anchored to purpose, those things lose their power. They may slow you down, they may challenge you, but they won't define you. Purpose gives you a filter. It helps you say no to the noise and yes to what matters. It simplifies the decision-making process. It clarifies your direction. Some people spend their lives waiting for the right wave of motivation to carry them into greatness. They wait for inspiration to strike, for the conditions to be perfect, for the energy to be just right. But the ones who make an impact, the ones who leave a legacy, are the ones who move with purpose regardless of how they feel. They show up on the days when they don't want to. They do the work when no one's watching. They commit to the process, not just the payoff. And here's the beautiful thing. Purpose isn't something you find once and hold onto forever. It evolves, it deepens, it becomes more refined with time and experience. But it requires attention, it requires reflection. You have to revisit it, reaffirm it, remind yourself what matters and why. Otherwise, the distractions will win, the fatigue will win, the world will try to drown it out. Your purpose is your anchor, your stabilizer. It's what holds you steady in turbulent waters, and when you commit to it, when you let it shape your actions, it becomes your greatest advantage, because while others wait to feel motivated, you're already moving. While others stall in uncertainty, you're already acting with clarity. Adversity doesn't ask for permission before it arrives. It doesn't wait for convenience, and it doesn't come with explanations. It shows up uninvited, often when we feel least prepared, in moments when we're already stretched thin. It takes on many forms: rejection, failure, loss, betrayal, disappointment, financial hardship, creative drought, health struggles. The first instinct is to resist it, to label it as unfair or meaningless, to wonder, why now, why me, why this? But adversity is rarely random. It doesn't come to punish, it comes to reveal, it comes to develop. The pain we feel in the face of adversity isn't just from the event itself, it's from what that event disrupts. It disrupts our expectations, our comfort, our rhythm, but disruption is also the birthplace of reinvention. If we let it, adversity can shift our perspective in ways comfort never could. It can force us to let go of illusions and pay attention to what actually matters. It doesn't always feel like it in the moment, but hardship is often an invitation to evolve. When we talk about growth, we tend to focus on learning new skills, gaining knowledge, collecting wins. But some of the deepest growth, the kind that shapes character, builds empathy, and strengthens resolve, comes from adversity. It's forged in those moments when things don't go our way, when the plan fails, when the door closes. It's easy to stay grounded when everything's working. It's easy to be confident when things are going according to schedule, but adversity introduces a different kind of opportunity. It gives us the chance to see what we're really made of. There's a moment that comes after the initial shock of difficulty, a quiet, reflective space where we begin to ask deeper questions. What now? What does this mean? What can I take from this? That's where the seed lies. The benefit is never obvious at first. Seeds are small. They're hidden. They don't shout for attention, but they carry within them everything needed to create something greater, something more resilient, something more authentic. The ones who navigate adversity well aren't the ones who avoid pain. They're the ones who learn to look through it. They train themselves to see past the surface and ask, what's inside this experience that I can grow from? They don't pretend it's easy, they don't minimize the hurt, but they choose not to waste it. They mine the difficulty for insight. They find the edges of who they were and start shaping who they can become. Adversity has a way of stripping things down. It removes what's unnecessary, it reveals what's real, it makes clear what's essential. When you lose a job, you find your identity wasn't the role you had, it was the value you bring. When a relationship ends, you realize your worth didn't walk away with that person. When a business fails, you understand the difference between failure of an idea and failure of a person. The seed is there, in the reframing, in the clarity, in the shift. It's human nature to resist struggle. But it's also human nature to rise in the face of it, to find strength we didn't know we had, to uncover layers of resilience that were dormant until challenge called them forward. History is full of people who turned adversity into the very thing that elevated them. Not because they had a secret formula, but because they were willing to stay in the discomfort long enough to find the value hidden inside. That's not to glorify pain or suffering. Adversity is hard, it's uncomfortable. It tests us, but it also opens doors that comfort keeps closed. It forces reflection, it stretches perspective, it forces us to grow deeper rather than wider. We're conditioned to think that forward progress only looks like upward momentum, more, faster, better. But adversity teaches us the value of downward growth, like roots deepening underground so the tree can stand taller later. That kind of growth isn't always visible, but it's vital. The benefit often doesn't come until later. We don't get the answers in the middle of the storm. We get them in hindsight, and even then, it's only if we choose to look back with curiosity rather than bitterness. Adversity doesn't automatically teach. It only teaches those who are willing to learn. Some people go through hardship and come out harder, more closed off. Others go through the same hardship and come out more compassionate, more grounded, more courageous. The difference isn't the adversity itself, it's the lens through which it's interpreted. When you shift your perspective from "why is this happening to me" to "what could this be growing in me," you activate something powerful. You begin to take agency. You stop being a victim of circumstance and start being a steward of your response. That shift doesn't change the reality of the adversity, but it changes the role it plays in your story. There's a kind of wisdom that only adversity teaches, a kind of confidence that only emerges when you've walked through fire and come out with your integrity intact. It teaches humility, it teaches patience, it gives you a deeper appreciation for the moments of peace, the relationships that matter, the value of consistency. It realigns your priorities. It forces you to redefine success, not just as achievement, but as resilience, as presence, as authenticity. Adversity also connects us to others. It breaks down the illusion of separation. When you've struggled deeply, you become more compassionate toward the struggles of others. You start to understand pain from the inside. That empathy creates leaders worth following. It creates relationships built on real understanding rather than surface-level support. It makes you someone who can sit with others in their pain, not just because you've studied it, but because you've lived it. The seed of greater benefit isn't always tangible. It's not always a new job or a better opportunity. Sometimes the benefit is who you become in the process. You become more centered, more emotionally intelligent, more purposeful, more aware of your strengths and your limits. You learn how to navigate uncertainty. You learn how to ask for help. You learn how to rebuild. These aren't small things. They are the foundation of a life that can weather more than just good days. It's natural to wish adversity away, to want the smooth road, to crave certainty and ease, but ease doesn't build capacity. Certainty doesn't teach agility. Smooth roads don't prepare you for sharp turns. The difficult seasons are the ones that expand your leadership, your depth, your grit. They forge something that can't be replicated in comfort, not because adversity is good, but because what it unlocks in us often is we don't control when adversity arrives, but we do control how we engage with it. We decide whether we see it as interruption or invitation. We choose whether it becomes a wall or a window, whether it hardens us or humbles us. The seed is there either way. Whether it grows depends on whether we are willing to plant it, water it, nurture it, learn from it. There are no shortcuts through adversity. It must be walked through, not skipped over. But when we walk it with awareness, with openness, with curiosity, it changes us. It creates depth. It deepens conviction. It burns off what was performative and leaves what is real. It leaves behind strength that doesn't need to announce itself. It leaves behind a sense of grounded confidence that can't be shaken by the next storm, and maybe most of all, adversity gives us perspective. It reminds us that we're not invincible, that things are fragile, that time is precious. But it also reminds us that we're more resilient than we knew, more adaptable than we imagined, and more capable than we thought. The benefit is often not in what adversity gives us, but in what it reveals. We already had success. Stories are easy to admire when we see the highlight reels. We watch the victory speeches, the published books, the sold-out events, the thriving companies, and it all seems inevitable. It's tempting to believe these people had some advantage the rest of us don't, that they were born with more talent, more opportunity, more confidence. But when you peel back the curtain on any genuine success story, what you find isn't magic, it's consistency. Not a single defining moment, but a string of choices made in moments when it would have been easier to give up. Every great achievement is less about the big breaks, and more about the small decisions made again and again not to quit. There's a mythology around success, this idea that it happens in a flash, that there's a tipping point, a breakthrough, a sudden transformation. But the truth is that most success is painfully incremental. It's built in the quiet hours when no one's watching. It's built on days when progress is invisible. It's built in silence, through tension, through doubt, through setbacks. What separates those who succeed isn't their ability to avoid difficulty. It's their commitment to stay in the game when difficulty shows up, to choose not to quit when quitting would make total sense. Every great story is stitched together by moments of hesitation, self-doubt, and near surrender. The writer who stares at the blank page wondering if the words will ever come, the entrepreneur who burns through savings before the idea finds footing, the athlete who questions if their body will ever catch up to their vision. And in each of those moments a choice is made, not a glamorous cinematic choice, a quiet one, a decision to keep going, to write one more sentence, to make one more call, to run one more lap. And over time, those decisions compound. We overestimate the importance of inspiration and underestimate the power of decision. Inspiration is fleeting. It's dependent on mood, timing, and environment. But decisions are grounded. They don't ask how you feel, they ask what you value. And when your values are clear, your decisions become stronger. You stop chasing motivation and start building endurance. You realize that success doesn't belong to the most excited person. It belongs to the most committed. Think about the moments in your own life when you were closest to quitting, the day you thought the effort wasn't worth it. The moment the feedback stung a little too deeply, the time when you couldn't see the payoff. If you're still here, still moving, still building, that's not an accident, that's the result of a decision you made. Maybe it didn't feel heroic at the time, maybe you just whispered to yourself, not yet. Maybe you showed up even though your heart wasn't in it. That counts, that matters. That is part of the success story you're building. The thing about small decisions is that they rarely feel significant in the moment. Saying yes to one more rep, saying no to one more excuse, making the hard call instead of the easy one, choosing to believe in yourself even when there's no evidence yet. These moments aren't celebrated, they're not photographed or shared, but they are the foundation. They're the structural integrity behind every headline, every milestone, every achievement that looks effortless from the outside. Success is deceptive like that. It looks like momentum, but underneath it is friction, friction that was faced, not avoided. It looks like flow, but underneath it is resistance that was wrestled with. People see the win and assume ease. They don't see the 100 times the person could have walked away but didn't. The truth is, success doesn't come to those who never fail. It comes to those who refuse to let failure be final. There's a discipline in continuing, in choosing the long game over the immediate reward, in staying loyal to the vision when the results haven't caught up. That's what builds mastery. That's what creates breakthroughs. The decision not to quit is never just about surviving the moment. It's about signaling to yourself that your purpose is bigger than your doubt, that your goal is more important than your fear, that your future matters more than your current discomfort. It's easy to make big promises in moments of clarity. It's harder to make small choices in moments of fatigue. But that's where success is really shaped, in the ordinary hours, in the mundane tasks, in the grind that doesn't look like progress. Every great success story includes thousands of moments that looked like nothing. No applause, no recognition, just a choice to keep building when no one else saw the structure taking shape. Those who endure aren't always the most skilled or the most charismatic. They're often the ones who are simply more stubborn about their purpose. They decide they're not leaving until the job is done. They make peace with imperfection. They accept that the path will include detours. And they make one small decision at a time to keep going anyway. When we hear the term overnight success, we're almost always hearing the end of a story that began years earlier. We're seeing the final chapter, not the prologue. We're witnessing the results of thousands of private moments when the person had every reason to walk away and chose not to. These choices often look like restraint, humility, persistence, and sacrifice. They rarely look like brilliance, but brilliance is born from consistency. Quitting is seductive because it offers immediate relief. It tells you that you can stop hurting, stop trying, stop risking, but that relief is temporary. What lingers after quitting is regret, not for failing, but for leaving the process before the reward had time to mature. Quitting robs you of the harvest because it interrupts the planting. Success doesn't bloom because you hope it will. It blooms because you stayed long enough to see it happen. Every single meaningful accomplishment is the result of someone choosing to take the next step when it was easier to stand still, of making the call when silence felt safer, of releasing the work when fear of judgment said to hold it back, of waking up and doing the work again when yesterday's effort went unnoticed. These aren't extraordinary actions. They're ordinary actions done consistently, driven by a belief that the effort will eventually matter. Belief is important, but belief alone isn't enough. Belief must lead to action, and when belief is weak, decision is what sustains you. Decision carries you through the days belief can't. Decision acts on your behalf when doubt is loud. Decision is the hand on your back pushing you forward when your own will falters. That's why the decision not to quit is so powerful. It reinforces the identity of someone who finishes what they start. Every great leader, artist, builder, athlete, inventor, they all have chapters they don't highlight. Chapters where the work was clumsy, the outcomes were disappointing, and the rewards were non-existent. But they didn't let that be the end of their story. They turned the page again and again, and every time they did, they made a small but powerful declaration: this still matters to me. I still care enough to try again. I'm not done yet. That's the difference between those who reach their goals and those who stop short. It's not a matter of ease or talent or fate. It's a matter of small decisions made daily in quiet resistance to comfort. It's a refusal to let temporary emotion override long-term vision. It's the courage to say, even when the voice in your head tells you otherwise, this is worth continuing. Success, at its core, is a story of resilience. And resilience isn't built in the spotlight. It's built in the silence between moments of recognition. It's built when you lace up the shoes again, when you open the notebook again, when you make the call again. It's built every time you decide the next step is still worth taking, even if the last one didn't take you as far as you hoped. The small decision not to quit might not feel like much, but every one of those choices adds up. Over time, they form a path, a pattern, a story, and that story begins to shape you into someone with stamina, with grit, with depth, someone who doesn't just wish for success, but is built to sustain it when it arrives. Faith alone is powerful, but faith without movement becomes a wish. Action alone is necessary, but action without belief becomes blind. The harmony between these two forces, faith and action, is where true transformation lives. One fuels the other. Faith points the way. Action moves the feet. When one is missing, the other weakens. Together, they create momentum, clarity, and purpose. People often treat faith and action as separate endeavors. There are those who believe with all their hearts but remain still, waiting for a sign, a guarantee, some form of permission. They hold on to hope, but they don't step forward. Then there are those who move endlessly, grinding through task after task, without ever reconnecting to why they began. They hustle, but they don't hope. They produce, but they don't believe. They burn out before they break through. In both cases, there's an imbalance. An imbalance eventually leads to collapse. Faith is the vision. It's the fire that lights the path before it's visible. It's the voice that whispers, there's something here, even if I can't see it yet. But faith without movement is a dream trapped in theory. It's potential without progress. It's waiting for the water to part without ever taking the first step. The purpose of faith isn't to comfort you. It's to challenge you to trust before certainty arrives. Faith demands that you act, even when the outcome isn't confirmed. Action, on the other hand, is the signal that you believe what you say you believe. Action is faith with feet. It's the difference between saying, I want this, and showing that you're willing to move toward it. But when action is disconnected from belief, it turns into noise. You run in circles, work harder and harder, but the results are empty because they're not tied to purpose. Activity is not the same as progress. Busyness is not the same as momentum. Movement doesn't mean growth unless it's anchored in direction, and that's what faith provides. Some people wait for faith to feel like confidence. They think they can't act until they're fearless. But faith isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision that something matters more than fear. You don't need full clarity to begin, you just need enough belief to take the next step. That's where courage lies, not in knowing everything will work out, but in choosing to move anyway. That kind of action builds resilience, that kind of faith builds endurance, and when you pair the two, you create a forward force that obstacles can't outlast. Every meaningful pursuit starts with a flicker of faith. An idea, a vision, a pull, and in the beginning that's all you have. There are no results yet, no applause, just the discomfort of starting. That discomfort is where most people stop. They assume that hesitation is a sign to quit. But in truth, it's just a sign that you're in new territory. The key is to act anyway, not recklessly, but intentionally, because every action is a declaration. I believe this is possible. I believe this is worth it. I believe I'm not wasting my time, and with every action your faith grows, because now it's not just an idea in your head. It's something you're building with your hands. You start to see feedback, even if it's small. You make mistakes, and those mistakes teach you. You pivot, you evolve, you develop grit, and what started as hope becomes conviction. But none of that happens without movement. Thinking doesn't change you. Doing does, not because doing is inherently better, but because doing is where belief becomes real. The people who change the world don't always have the clearest plans, but they have the strongest conviction. And that conviction pushes them to act, even when the results are far off. They keep showing up. They keep writing, building, serving, creating. They don't wait until they feel ready. They move because the purpose demands it. They move because they've decided the mission matters more than their fear of failure on the other side. There are people who act without anchoring that action in belief. They build for applause. They chase what's trending. They grind endlessly, hoping the work will validate them, but action without faith becomes fragile. It cracks under pressure, because when setbacks come, and they always come, there's no deeper reason to continue. Action powered by ego, by fear, by desperation doesn't last. It burns bright and fast and then collapses. Only action powered by faith can sustain the long journey. Faith without action is like staring at a map and never taking the trip. Action without faith is like running through the woods without a compass. Neither will get you where you want to go, but when the two walk together, you move with power, you move with integrity, you move with a kind of steadiness that doesn't flinch when things go wrong. Because you're not just reacting, you're responding, you're not just busy, you're building something that matters. This pairing matters even more when you face adversity. Because when the path gets unclear, when the outcomes don't arrive on schedule, when the voices of doubt get loud, you'll need faith to keep you aligned and action to keep you moving. Faith reminds you why. Action reminds you how. You won't always have momentum, you won't always feel inspired, but you can always decide to act, and that decision reinforces your belief. Over time, this cycle becomes self-sustaining. Faith without proof is uncomfortable. Action without certainty is risky, but comfort and certainty don't build dreams, they protect the status quo. If you want to build something that lasts, whether it's a business, a movement, a life of purpose, you'll need to make peace with tension. The tension of starting before you're sure, the tension of acting while afraid, the tension of walking with faith and action side by side. People often talk about balance as if it means doing less, but real balance is about alignment. It's about bringing your internal convictions and your external actions into sync. When your words and your work match, you build trust. When your beliefs and your behaviors match, you build confidence. And when your faith and action match, you build momentum that compounds over time. No one will ever hand you the perfect conditions. You won't wake up one day with zero doubt. The people who keep going are the ones who don't require ideal circumstances. They require only a reason. That reason becomes the root of their faith, and that faith fuels their actions. Every day they recommit, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. There's a myth that successful people are fearless. But that's not true. Successful people feel the fear, but they move anyway. Their faith isn't in outcomes, it's in process. Their faith isn't in perfection, it's in persistence. Their actions aren't flawless, but they're consistent. They understand that the power is in showing up with integrity day after day, whether the world notices or not. This is the secret that's not glamorous, the daily, disciplined pairing of belief and behavior. Faith in the mission, action toward the goal, over and over again. When you understand this, you stop waiting for miracles. You become part of them. You stop searching for shortcuts. You start trusting the steps. You stop asking for certainty. You start leading with conviction. It's not about massive leaps. It's about faithful steps. It's not about sudden transformation. It's about steady alignment. Every time you pair belief with action, you cast a vote for the person you're becoming. And over time, those votes add up. You move from someone who hopes things will change to someone who changes things, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Every time you act in alignment with your belief, you become more trustworthy to yourself. That trust is foundational. It's what allows you to keep showing up, even when results are slow. It's what allows you to lead others, not with noise, but with substance. Because they can feel it, your congruence, your integrity, your resolve. When you walk with faith and action together, you develop a quiet power. You stop chasing momentum and start creating it. You stop waiting for direction and start providing it. You stop needing external validation and start living with internal conviction. You become the kind of person people trust, follow, and remember, not because you shouted the loudest, but because you lived your beliefs out loud. You'll still face fear. You'll still face doubt, but those things won't define you. What will define you is your willingness to believe deeply and act consistently. To say, I don't know everything, but I know what matters. To say, I can't see the finish line, but I can take the next step. And then actually take it. That is what builds legacies, not perfection, not charisma, not luck, but the daily pairing of what you believe with what you do. Over time, that alignment compounds into trust, into impact, into legacy. Defeat is a part of the process, not the end of the journey. We've come to fear defeat, to associate it with shame, with failure, with the end of the road. But defeat in its truest form is a teacher. It arrives not to signal the end, but to test your willingness to continue. It doesn't ask if you're good enough, it asks if you're committed enough. And the most important distinction you can ever learn is that defeat is not failure, not unless you decide it is. There's something deceptive about the first major setback. It feels definitive. You launch a product and no one buys. You publish the article and no one reads. You take the risk and it backfires. That moment is heavy with emotion. Doubt creeps in. You begin to question your instincts, your competence, your direction. But none of that is evidence of failure. It's evidence that you've stepped into real effort, that you've gone beyond talk and into action, and once you're in motion, friction is inevitable. The only people who avoid defeat are the ones who never try. Temporary defeat is not a verdict. It's a signal that something in your approach needs adjusting, a signal that this is one of the many points where most people choose to quit. It's part of the pattern. The way you interpret that signal determines everything. Some treat defeat as feedback, others treat it as proof they were never meant to start. The difference lies in mindset, in whether you see difficulty as a wall or a detour, in whether you interpret resistance as rejection or refinement. Look closely at anyone who has done something meaningful. You will find a trail of losses, missed opportunities, rejections, pivots, and quiet moments of despair. These are not anomalies. These are markers on the path. What distinguishes those who persist isn't that they never faced defeat. It's that they didn't take it personally. They didn't assign a permanent meaning to a temporary result. They didn't fold their identity into the outcome. They learned from the moment without becoming the moment. Too many people treat setbacks as evidence that they're broken, that they lack talent, that they've made a mistake they can't come back from. But the most dangerous thing about temporary defeat isn't the pain, it's the story you tell yourself about what that pain means. If the story becomes, "This proves I'm not good enough," then you start shrinking, you play smaller, you stop trying. But if the story becomes, "This is a challenge I can grow through," then you stay open, you adapt, you improve, and you build something stronger. The truth is, anything worth building will involve seasons of struggle. That's not a punishment. It's a process. Think of it like weight training. The muscle doesn't grow unless it's pushed to its limit. The strain isn't assigned to stop. It's the mechanism by which strength is built. Temporary defeat is the same. It pushes your thinking, your endurance, your creativity. It forces you to refine your vision. It demands resilience. Without that stress, your capacity remains stagnant. Defeat stretches you in ways success never will. It's also where you meet yourself. In the moment when you want to quit, what you do next tells you everything. Do you collapse or do you recalibrate? Do you retreat or do you recommit? That choice is yours. You may not control the outcome, but you absolutely control your interpretation. And in that space between what happens and how you respond is where your power lives. We tend to look at successful people and assume their journey was smooth, but that's rarely the case. The author whose manuscript was rejected 30 times. The entrepreneur whose first 3 ventures failed. The speaker who couldn't fill a room at the start. These are not exceptions. They are the rule. The victories we celebrate are built on foundations of refusal to quit. And that refusal isn't rooted in arrogance. It's rooted in clarity. The clarity that defeat isn't a label. It's a lesson. Defeat is humbling. It strips away the illusions. It exposes the gaps, but that exposure is a gift. It's a mirror held up to your process. It forces honesty. It sharpens your focus. It eliminates the fluff. After a defeat, your next move is often your best one, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. It's grounded. It's informed by experience rather than just theory. It's worth noting that not all defeat is loud. Sometimes it's quiet and internal. Sometimes it shows up as burnout, disengagement, apathy. You stop caring because it hurts too much to hope. You downsize your ambition to avoid disappointment. That's still defeat, just in a different form. and if you're not careful, that kind of defeat can settle in and start shaping your identity. The way out isn't to pretend it didn't happen. The way out is to reframe it, to remind yourself that temporary defeat is not a signal to shrink, but an invitation to reimagine. You get to decide what defeat means. You get to decide whether a failed launch is a death sentence or a data point, whether a rejection is personal or professional, whether a delay is the end or just a redirection. That decision determines your trajectory. Not the loss itself, but your interpretation of the loss. That's the power most people never realize they have. They keep waiting for permission to keep going. But the only permission that matters is the one you give yourself. We tend to think failure is an event, a final stamp. But failure is rarely final. What makes it final is acceptance. When you decide the setback defines you, until then, it's just a point in time. It's just one result in a long sequence, and when you zoom out, you realize most failures are barely a footnote in the full story. They sting, yes, but they also teach, they redirect, they build character that can't be built through ease. Temporary defeat reveals who's in it for the applause and who's in it for the mission. It separates the ones chasing validation from the ones committed to impact. When you face resistance and keep going, you build credibility, not just with others, but with yourself. That internal trust becomes your anchor, because the next time defeat shows up, and it will, you won't panic. You'll recognize it, you'll remember you've been here before, and you'll move forward anyway. The ability to bounce back isn't just resilience, it's strategy. It's learning how to take the hit and still move. How to find insight in the pain, how to adjust without losing faith. That's a skill you build, not something you're born with, and it starts with redefining defeat, not as a signal to stop, but as a challenge to grow. Most people underestimate how close they are when they quit. The breakthrough often comes just after the moment of greatest resistance, but you don't see it because defeat clouds your vision. It tells you to turn back. It whispers that you've already wasted too much time. That voice is persuasive, but it's not truth, it's fear. And the only way to silence it is to keep going, not because you're guaranteed success, but because you're building something that can't be built any other way. Every step you take after a defeat is a declaration that you refuse to be defined by a single moment, that your identity is not tied to outcome, that your value is not up for debate, that your purpose is worth more than your pride. Those declarations, made silently in the dark, are what create strength that lasts. Not the kind of strength that looks good on stage, but the kind that carries you through the long, hard seasons. Temporary defeat is inevitable. It will knock the wind out of you. It will test your resolve. But it cannot stop you unless you hand over the keys, unless you decide that the price of trying again is too high, and that decision is rarely about ability. It's about belief, belief that the vision is still valid, that the mission is still meaningful, that your next step still matters. The truth is, the moment you redefine defeat, you reclaim power. You shift from victim to builder, from reactor to leader. You stop asking, why me, and start asking, what now? That question is transformative. It puts you back in the driver's seat. It reminds you that progress doesn't require perfection, just persistence. You don't have to ignore the pain. You don't have to pretend it didn't hurt. But you do have to decide that the story isn't over, that this chapter isn't the conclusion, that what you do next is more important than what just happened, and that decision made in the middle of defeat is the beginning of everything that comes after.